All right, cool. So, what I want to do in this session is I want to give you guys a high level overview of what are the things that are involved in a testing phase. Okay. So, what is testing? What are the different tools that are used? What are the technologies that are involved, the front end, the back end? And I just want to go over some of the technical terms. So, when we go for marketing, at least you guys have some idea on how to talk with the vendors. What are the things that are on your resume that you can at least explain those things and all this. Okay, so this is a very, very high level overview. And as we go along, we're going to discuss more technical details. Okay, so at least I want to give you a bigger picture first, because once we start marketing, I think, you might get some calls from the vendors. You may have to speak technically on the different terms that are in your resume. So I just want to give you a high level picture in this session, but in the next sessions, we're going to go more practically on each of those tools. So this is more of a high level picture. Okay. So what is testing, right? So there are, in general, you have software development or software. Okay. So let's say any company, take Amazon, eBay, um, any company in general, right? So you have a bunch of software. Let's take Amazon, for example. You have Amazon website, and behind the scenes you have a bunch of products, and those products are being shipped out and all this, right? So you have a front end website that the company exposes, and customers can come to the website, e-commerce website, and then they can interact with the website. So they can do a login, and once they are logged into the page, they can search for some products. They can place an order on those products. I mean, you can search for the products without even logging in. And then, yeah, you can add to a cart. Once you add an item to the cart, you can pretty much place an order. You can choose different shipping options and all those. Okay. So that's a functionality that the website is exposing. Behind the scenes, there are certain services that are running. So let me load some product here. So I'm just taking an example of Amazon. But in general, there are many different companies that don't even have a website. So let's take, for example, something like a reinsurance, right? So you have a back-end service that is running, and on the front end, you might have some company like Geico, Penn Mutual, or Liberty Mutual that is getting the quote, but behind the scenes, there is a reinsurer that is actually providing the rates. Okay, so there are some companies that don't even have a website, but there are some other services where running on the front end side and so on. So different softwares have different types of implementations. Um, yeah, so let's take Amazon as an example first, and then we'll discuss other things or other setups. Okay. So if I have this, if I go to the website, Amazon website, I see all these things, right? So on a blank page, or as soon as the user comes in, you have these products that are being shown into different categories. Okay, so you can see this category, which is overstock and small season. So all season products and so on. Okay, so you have different categories here, and it's showing products of different categories. Okay, so a user can come in and he can say, "Hey, I want something like iPhone." Okay, so you can search for that, and then you have different products that are being shown here. Okay, now a user can click on this, and it can show more details. So here you have something like a price. On top of the price, there is something called reviews, and the product details, different product configurations that you have, and all that. Okay, so behind the scenes, there may be multiple services that are running there. Okay, so for the reviews, there may be a separate service that is running just purely for the reviews. Okay, so we're going to see what is a service. But yeah, behind the scenes on the backend side, there can be dedicated service just for these reviews. And then if I scroll up, and then you have a price. Again, there might be a separate service to get me a price. There might be a separate service for getting the different configurations. And then you have something called as related products. That means what are the things that are related to this particular product. So if I scroll up, Yeah, something like this. Okay, so you have something like a related products. That means you have one product and then you have something related to that particular product. So these are all the things that are behind the scenes. There are services. Okay, so what we are looking at right now is a front end, and behind the scenes there's a service running, and the service can have behind the scenes a database. Okay, so if I have to put this in a pictorial terms, um, so it will be something like this. Okay, yeah, front end, back end. I'm going to take a picture. Yeah, let's take this example. Yeah. So front end is something that you are interacting with the website, and back end is a place where it's providing the data information to the front end. Okay, the front end is running on my local computer, which is on this particular browser on my system. Okay, that's where the front end is running. The back end is where the service is running, which is running on Amazon's internal servers. Okay, it can be on the cloud. We're gonna go to the cloud later on, but yeah. So this backend is purely, completely on the service. On the servers, which is on the company internal servers and so on. Okay, the front end is running on my local PC. Okay, so this guy is connecting to the backend using uh, different protocols. One of them is REST protocol. Okay, so let's click on this. Okay, so the front end can be in HTML, CSS, JavaScript, jQuery, AngularJS, or any of these. Okay, so it can be. It's usually the combination of all these things. Okay, the backend, which is where the service is implemented, there are different technologies that are involved for developing the backend. It can be a PHP, Java, Python, Node.js kind of technologies. And then you can also have a SQL server or a database that is storing the data and all that. Okay, so that's the backend technologies that are involved there. Okay, now the testing part, when you guys come in, you got to test as a whole product. Okay, that means you should be testing the front end, and you should also be testing the back end. Okay, so what does it involve in testing the front end? So if I go here, so right now I'm not logged into the website, so it shows me an option to sign in. Okay, that means the very first time when you load the page, it should give me an option to sign in. Okay, so that's one of the test case, a simple test case. Okay, when I click on the sign in button, it should take me to the sign in page, and it should show me this page. Okay, so this is another test case. That means if you click on that, it should show you this page. Okay, and when you're logged in, then it should show you that sign out option. Okay, I mean right now I'm not logged in, but if I am logged in, then this sign in option here should become a sign out option. Okay, so these are all the test cases that you can do. Similarly, if I search for something, it should show me the related products. And looking at the price, is the price correct or wrong? So all these are the front end testing that you can do. Okay. Now the thing is, let's say I place an order. Okay. Once I place an order, is the service doing it, processing it correctly? Okay. So on the back end side, there can be Python, Java, or any of these technologies, right? So you got to also test whether the service is doing its job. That means when I place an order, is the order really in the system, or is the service processing it correctly, not correctly? Is there an error in the processing? That's one of the test case. Okay. Similarly, if you let's say you got certain reviews and so on. Okay, so you create a review. You create a review with an image and all that. Is the review stored correctly in the database or not? Okay, so that's another test case. You can also test for something like you can add multiple products, and then you can see the tags, whether the tax is being reflected correctly or not. That can be another test case. Okay, so you're testing the backend along with the database. Okay, so you create an order, you go to the database, you verify whether that order is in the database or not. Okay, you create a new customer, you go to the database, you verify whether the new customer is in the database or not. Okay, so that's another test case. So you can write multiple different test cases on the backend side, and you're also going to write it on the front end side. Okay. Now there is, again, you can automate, you can do manual testing. Okay. Manual testing, pretty much you're going to the, let's say on the front end side, if it's manual testing, you're going to do manually. That means you're going to click on the sign in button, you're going to enter the details, username, password, press the sign in option, and verify manually. That means you're looking at it and you're confirming that everything is working fine. Okay. But if you're going to automate it, then we need to have some libraries that can help you do this. That means you're going to use something like Python or Java, and then launch a website, open the website, go to the URL. All this is automated. Okay, so we're going to see those examples on how to automate or how to open the browser from the Python code, and how to go to the website, how to click on those things all automatically. Okay, and then you can also confirm what are the contents of the web page. Okay, Python is very good with string processing, data processing, and all that. So you, once the web page is loaded, you can definitely look at the contents of the web page. You can say, hey, once I sign in, is there a word called sign out on top of the page or not? What are the properties of those contents and all that? So Python can help you test on the front end side. Now on the back end, when it comes to back end, so here is the fun part. Even though the page on the front end side, even though it is HTML, CSS, or JavaScript, Python is making a request as if it is a browser. Okay, so from the browser's point of view, it's making a request, it's getting a HTML, CSS, JavaScript page back, and then the browser shows up in a nice way. Okay, but if I look at the backend, or if I look at the actual page, so I'm going to do right click and inspect. Okay, so this is going to show me the actual web page, the contents of the web page and all that. Okay, so if I expand this guy, okay, hopefully you guys can see the contents here. Let me put the font. So this is actual, this is the web page that is being displayed here. Okay, so on the right side, you can see the HTML, CSS, and all those contents. Okay. Now, as I keep scrolling here, you can see something is selected on the left side also. That means this section corresponds to the left side of the web page section. Okay, so the highlight tells me that this highlight is coming from this section here. Okay, so if I keep scrolling, I might get a different section that is highlighted. Okay, so this is one of the feature that browsers provide. That means you can debug your web page. You can see what are the contents of the web page and all that. Okay, but the reason why I bring this up is when we go from Python, we're going to get something on the right hand side. What you see on the right hand side is being returned as a web page. We're not going to see the left hand side. So from that, we can definitely see, hey, do I have a sign in option here? Okay, so I can do something like, so let me do here, Control F, find by string here. Okay, so I'm going to do sign in. Okay. Sign space. Okay. Okay, you can see that on the top where I have this option here. So here, okay. So inside this element, there's a sign-in option. Okay. So similarly, in Python, once I get a web page, I can do find by text or find by element, find by class name, or any of those, and I can do sign in, and that can tell me that it exists and all that. Okay. So from Python, we get this web page on the right hand side, and then we're going to validate the contents and all that. Okay. Now on the backend side, okay. So on the backend side, we also have different technologies, but the main protocol between the front end and the backend is the REST services. Okay. So if I, yeah, this might be more appropriate, right? Okay. So you have front end here, which is interacting with the backend. Okay. Now the backend itself is a different language. Okay, so how does JavaScript coordinate on the backend side? That means there is a common messaging protocol that is involved, which is something like a JSON data, or it can be XML data, or it can be binary data, or anything of that nature. Okay, so I'm going to give you some examples of how the data is flowing between these services. Okay. What is a protocol that is involved? Let's take this. Okay. All right, you see this? This is how the JSON data is going to look like. Okay. So you're going to have the element as a key value on the left hand side, and the element value is going to be on the right hand side. Okay. So the key element name is going to be on the left hand side, and the key value will be on the right hand side. So in this case, you have something like a number, which is 1. Okay. So the number is actually the field, and the value is going to be 1. Okay. Same thing. You have a name that's a key, and this is the value of that key. Okay, age, key, where is the value, and so on. Okay, and then you have another record here, which is second record. Okay, and then you have another record, and so on. And then when you have this square bracket, that means it's a list of those values. Okay, so you have one record here followed by a comma, another record followed by a comma, and all that. That means this is how the JSON data is laid out: a key and a value. Key is going to be the name of that parameter, and the value is the value of the parameter. Okay. So we're going to come back to JSON, and I'm going to talk more about what are the different things that are there. So here you can see integers. A number is an integer. This is a string type. Again, another integer. This double quotes is going to be a string. Okay. So you have strings, numbers. You can have a list of values. This is a list of values. And this whole thing inside the curly parenthesis is going to be a record. It's called a dictionary, record, and so on. Okay, so we're going to come back and talk about the details. But that's how the JSON data is going to look like. Okay, so this is one of the format. In the sense, the front end comes in and says, "Hey, give me the product details." Okay, and then the backend is going to respond back, saying the product ID is this, product name is this, product price is this. And if you are looking at a main page, you might have multiple products. So it might give you a list of products with a square bracket, curly parentheses, and all that. Okay, so the JSON data is going to look like that, which I just showed you. Okay, so that's one of the protocol that can be involved in there. Because the backend is running one of the technologies, which can be a Java, C++, Python, JavaScript, or any of those. The front end is running a different technology. So there has to be some common messaging format that has to go between these two different technologies or services and all that. Okay, so the most of the times JSON data is used, which is key value pairs. In some cases, XML data is also used. Okay, so let's look at XML. Okay. Okay, so XML data is going to look like this. Okay, which is you're going to have something like what is the version of XML, what is the encoding that is used, whether it's ASCII encoding or whether it's UTF. There are different characters, and you can have certain foreign characters and so on. So it also specifies what is the encoding that is being used. And then you have a main tag, is called a tag or a node, a main node, and inside you have subnodes. Okay, same thing as what we saw before, but this is how this is how it looks like. You have an angle bracket. This is called an angle bracket, and then you have the tag name of the tag. Okay, and then for every tag that is open, there has to be a close tag. Okay, so you put a backslash, and then you end the tag. Okay, for everything that is opening tag, there has to be a closing tag. Okay, and same thing, two is another field that's inside there. and this is the content of that field, and then we're going to end the tag. Okay, so this is how the XML data is going to look like. You have an opening tag, you have the value of the tag, and then you have the closing tag. Okay, so by looking at these two, XML and JSON, you can see that they are very not similar, I should say, but they both have something like a tag or a field name and the value of the field. Okay, so in the JSON, you can see simply the name and the corresponding value separated by a comma. Okay, so for humans, for us, it's very clear, right? But when it comes to the machine parsing, if you have to choose between XML and JSON, um, you got parsers for JSON, you got parsers for XML data, and both can be equally parsed. But from a machine's point of view, this XML might be more preferred. It might be more preferred because you can specify exactly the schema that is behind. So there is something called a schema. We're going to talk about what the schema means. But yeah, I mean, this might be more preferable because you know exactly where it's starting, where it's ending, and all that kind of stuff. But you can also define a schema. So let me just quickly talk about what is schema. So there is something called as XSD, which is XML schema definition. Okay. Yeah, I don't want to overload you guys with all these terms here, but there is a schema definition that comes into the picture that tells what is the structure of this XML. So what is the node name? What is the value of the node name? Can it be an integer? Can it be a string? So all that is predefined in that schema. Okay. Uh, but for now, let's assume that both of them are equivalent. Okay. So JSON data has key value pairs. XML has the same thing: opening tag, value of the tag, and a closing tag. Okay. And also, if you can see the amount of data, that means in JSON there is a field name and the field value. Okay. So every field name is occurring once. Okay. In the XML, every field is going to be occurring twice. Okay, the size of the data is going to be more in XML. Okay, so if I have thousands of records, and each of those 1,000 records have an opening tag, closing tag, and it has like 10 fields, you can see that there's a lot of data that is added to the XML. Okay, in JSON, the size of the data might be smaller. But yeah, these are some of the differences, and these are some of the considerations that has to be taken when the developers decide what is the protocol that is being used and all that. Okay. Maybe I'm going too much into details, so let me come back and talk about the bigger picture. Okay. All right. So we have the backend, which can be PHP, it can be Python, and so on. Okay. So you can have different services that are running. Okay. So let me just open this. Now Python also offers certain this is better actually. Python also offers some libraries to test the server side. Okay, so Python has Python has libraries like REST request library that can make REST protocols, APIs, and so on. We're going to look at some of those examples. We are also going to implement some of the test cases on how to test those services. And similarly, you have a database. Okay, so the database is where the actual data is stored. So once the server stops, it has no concept of storage, persistent storage, and anything. Okay, so all the data has to be stored uh, either in a file or in a database or someplace. Okay, these are persistent storage. Persistent means even if the machine stops or reboots, the data is still stored consistently. Okay, so the database offers. This is where the data is stored. Okay, so it offers certain advantages: persistent storage. It offers consistency and so on. Okay, you can have multiple services that are connecting to the database and getting the data. So one of the instance may be reading the data. Another server might be updating the data. So the database offers certain advantages like consistency. what if one of the process is updating while the other process is reading? Should I give you the new data? Should I give you the old data? All that the database takes care of it. Okay. So the browser, on the other hand, is the front end that we saw before. So Python offers libraries that you can test the front end, you can test the server, and you can test the databases also. Okay. So we're going to look at each of those libraries at a high level. Okay. So for the front end, if I want to test using Python, you have something called as Selenium library. Okay. So you can So Python has this library called Selenium. Okay, so Selenium itself is a very generic library, and they have provided interfaces for Python, Java, and I believe for other languages also. But yeah, here since we are concentrating on Python, so this is a library that can be imported into Python, and then I can load a web page. I can open up a browser, something like a Chrome browser, Firefox, or any browser, and then I can go to the web page and I can find the elements. I can enter value into the fields. So here I have something called as a search field. So I can enter those values in the search fields. I can click on the buttons if I want to. All that actions, anything that I can do manually, I can automate using Python Selenium. Okay. And then I can also validate what are the contents of the web page, all that using Selenium. Okay. Now for the backend, we have Python has a library called as a requests. Okay. So the requests library, you can use it to make a request to the backend. Okay. So I can make a service request. I'm going to show you an example also today, how to make a request and all that. Hopefully you guys installed Postman. That's the service that we're going to use to make a request. But at the same time, yeah, Python has this library called as requests that you can make a request to a backend. You can get the response. So if I have a service that is processing the product information, I can say, hey, give me the product information. And once I get the information, I can say, does this price correct? Is the value correct? Is the number of reviews correct? And so on. Okay, so we can also create a new order. We can create a review and all those things. Okay, so all those interactions, we can use Python request library. Okay, and to test the backend, which is a database, you also have certain other libraries. So let's say you want to connect to, so let's talk about databases for a second, quick second. So in the databases, you have different flavors of database. Okay, so databases itself is a, yeah. So let's go to databases. So you have, yeah. Yeah, so you have something like PostgreSQL. Okay, PostgreSQL is one of the database that is being open. That's an open source database. It's a relational data store that is free. That means I can download, I can run it locally, or I can even run it on a server and so on. It's open source, is free software, and it has a lot of the features. Okay. Similarly, you have MySQL database, which is also open source. It has some features that are different from PostgreSQL. Okay, IBM DB2, as you guys can guess, it's from IBM, and it's a paid software. That means you have to pay for that, and they will give you the software you can install and all that. Okay. Microsoft SQL Server is another paid server, paid database, and it's very expensive actually. Same thing with Oracle also. It's also a very expensive product. But all of them, the feature-wise, they're very similar. Okay, so you can create a table, you can have some columns in the table, and there are relationship between the data. That means you have foreign keys, unique key constraints. We're going to talk about those things, but there are some relationships. Let's say you have a product which purely describes the product information. Okay, and then you have a customer table which has customer name, customer address, and those things. Okay, and then you can have a third table which is an order table. That is a mapping between customer and a product. Okay, so if a product is being if an order is being placed by a customer with two products or so on, so this order table is going to have a customer ID and a product ID and all those. But yeah, so you can have different tables and you can have a mapping or a relationship between the tables and all this. Okay. So we're going to look at some of those examples also, and we're going to actually implement some queries. We're going to write some queries. But yeah, these are some relational databases. Okay. Now you have a Mongo database. Mongo is not a relational database. It's a non-relational or a NoSQL database. Okay. That means you have one table where you store all the information. Okay. You have customer data, fine. We're going to put in that table. You have product information, we're going to put in the same table. You have order information, you're also going to put in the same table. Okay. So there's no relationship or no relational kind of a structure. It's all JSON data. Okay. So we are going to have key value pairs and everything is inserted into the same table. Okay. So Mongo database is a little different, but yeah, every database has its own advantages, pros and cons. We're also going to look at some of those. But yeah, Mongo database is a non-relational data, and Postgre, MySQL, all the rest of the databases that are shown here are relational databases. Okay. Guys, if you have any questions, you can interrupt me and you can ask me any questions if you have. Or you can type it in the chat also. Okay. So, all right. So Python offers all these things, right? So now let's say, as a very simple example, if I have this, okay, that means I have a web page. I'm going to the web page, getting the web page, right? So what does it involve behind the scenes? Okay, so since I have a front end that is talking to the server, so let's look at this protocol here. Okay, so the browser is going to the server. Okay, so I'm just looking at the first arrows. So here itself, there is a protocol called as a REST protocol. Okay, so I'm going to show you that. REST API. So this is a protocol that is being used there between the front end and the server. And it is pretty much a HTTP protocol. And yeah, let's open maybe this time. Yeah, this is better actually. Okay, so you have some protocol that is being used. Okay, so the front end where the clients are, they are doing a HTTP GET request. GET means you have a page that is already existing, and then we are getting that information. Okay, so that is a GET request. A user can come in, also create a new order or a new user. So you can go to the user registration page, and then you can enter some fields, and then you can press submit. Okay, so that request is called a post request. So anytime you create a new resource, is called a post request. Okay, so that is a different request. That means the resource is not existing before, and now we are creating that resource. That for that you have a separate method called as a post request. Okay, let's say you already have the information, you already have the user, and you want to change the phone number, address, or any of that. Okay, so that's going to be a patch request. That means the data is already existing, but you want to change one field, two fields, you want to do an update. Okay, so that is called a patch request. In some cases, you can also do a put request. There's a difference between put and a patch. Put, you have to provide all the data. Okay, even though it's not changed, you have to provide all the data. That's a put request. In a patch request, you can provide only the data that got modified. That's a patch request. Okay, so this is a service that is getting these requests, and then it's interacting with the database in the sense it's storing in the database, it's getting the data from the database, and all that. Okay? Now, so this is the REST API. REST stands for resourceful. Let me just look it up. Yeah, you can see RESTful. Yep, which is pretty much. They don't have an acronym. So there's a state associated. Okay, so S stands for state. Just look it up. Okay, here it is, representational state transfer. Okay, so what does a state mean? State means does the resource exist? That means it is in a exist state. Okay, if the resource does not exist and you're creating, pretty much you're creating a resource. Okay, so there are different states that are associated. One is exists, not exists. That's a very simple state. Okay, you can also do an update of the state. That means you're updating that particular resource. That's an updating state. But yeah, the state pretty much means that there is something that is already existing, or and you are doing certain actions on those resources. But yeah, that is what REST stands for, representational state transfer. Okay, that means you are changing the state also. But we are not going to look at those acronyms. I mean, nobody's going to ask you what is a REST, what does REST stand for, unless the guy is crazy. But yeah, that's what the acronym stands for. Okay. Now we saw that there are different get, put, post, patch. Okay. There's also something else which is delete. Delete request. That means you already have a resource and you want to delete that. That's another delete request. Okay, so here you go. Okay, so it's when you are trying to create, you do a post request. Okay, let's say the resource is already existing and you want to get the resource. That's a read request. Okay, that's a get request. The resource is already existing and you want to do an update. That's a put request, or you can also do a patch request. Okay, and you want to delete something, that's called a delete request. Okay, and this is famously called as CRUD operations. Okay, CRUD pretty much means create, read, update, delete. Okay, so these are the basic operations any service has to provide, and these are the methods that you have to test whenever you test a service. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay, this is another interesting diagram here. Okay, so we were looking at just the front end, which was the web applications, the browsers, but it can be anything. It can be a mobile application. It can be another service interacting with the service. That means the front end or somebody is going to the web service. One service can interact with another service also. Okay, and these services are interacting with the data, or it can read a file from the cloud, or so on. Okay, so the services are very important because they provide the data, and one service can talk to another service also. But yeah, the clients can also be different clients. It can be web browsers, mobile applications. Let's say you're playing a game on your mobile device. It might be interacting with another server. So let's say you're playing a multiple player game where there's another user somewhere else, and you have to get the data from the server regarding the other user. So one service is interacting with another service also. It can be a mobile application. So for the mobile applications, there is a different front end. You can still use JavaScript, jQuery, AngularJS. But if you want to run natively on a mobile device, you use something called as Android Studio. Android is one of the operating systems. Or you can also use something like a QTQML. That's another technology. Whenever you're running on a device, let's say you have a medical device, okay, something like a blood pressure monitoring device. You can use, you're not going to use JavaScript, jQuery, those technologies, but you'll be using something like a QTQML, okay? Or if you have a thermostat in your home, like a Nest or some of those thermostats, you have your own UI components there. QTQML is one of the technologies that is being used there. Okay, so front end can be anything. It can be QTQML, Android Studio, Objective C, or it can be JavaScript or so on. So on the front end side also, you got a bunch of technologies that you can use. And Python has libraries to test all of this. Okay, QtQML, there's a PyQtQML that you can test it out. For the front end JavaScript, you can use Selenium. So let's find some simple example of doing some manual testing. Okay, so we'll start off with manual, and in the next sessions we'll go with automating. Okay, so hopefully you guys installed Postman. So let's, on the front end side, so manual testing on the front end, as I explained, there's not much, in the sense you're going to click on a button, you're going to verify that the tag is showing up properly, the values are showing up properly, and all that. Okay, but for the service side, I cannot do manually, in the sense I need to have some tool that can connect to the database and connect to the service and get me the data. Okay, for that we're going to use this Postman tool. The Postman can help me make a request. Okay, it can go to the backend and I can get the data and all that. Okay, all right. So when you launch the Postman, this is how it's going to look like. Okay, so I don't have any collections. Collections is a group of you can call it a group of requests or a group of test cases and so on. Okay, so I'm going to create a collection here first. I'm going to just press on create collection, and I'm going to name this as demo collection. Okay, so this is a tool that is very important. I mean, if you're doing manual testing or even automation testing, you're going to interact with this tool a lot. Okay, Postman is a very important tool. Okay, so I just created a demo collection here, and I'm going to press on this new here. Okay, you see the new. I'm going to click on the new option there, and it's going to show me a bunch of things here. Okay, I'm going to create a new request. Okay, so this is a request that we're going to make to a dummy service. Okay, all right. So first, let me find a service that can give me the data. Okay, so I'm going to look on the internet for some dummy REST APIs. Okay, so there is this dummy sample REST API. This is JSON placeholder, so I'm going to go to this free fake API. Okay, all right. So here you can see there are some resources. Okay, and these are the routes. I'm going to increase the font here. I'm going to send you the link also. So I posted the link in the GoToMeeting chat. But yeah, if you scroll down, you're going to see that this website offers a bunch of these requests. Okay, so think of this as a comment forum. Okay, you can post or you can create a new post. Okay, you can comment on that web page. Okay, so that will be posts. Okay, that means I'm going to create a post. Okay, or if you already have a post and you want to update it, you're going to do a put request, and that's going to be a put request on the post. Okay, let's say you have a post, a comment, and you want to delete that, you can do the delete of that. Okay, or if something is already existing and you want to get that, you can get the post. Okay, so there are some methods that are supported here. Get methods, put method, patch, and delete methods. So I'm going to take the get method first. Okay, so I'm going to click on this, and it tells me this is the data that is there on the get request. Okay, so you can see that there's a user ID, and as you can obviously see, this is JSON data. Okay, and you have a key and a value. Okay, you have a user ID as 1, and there's another ID. This is some internal identifier. Okay, so the same user ID can have multiple posts. Okay, so the first one is ID 1, the same user ID is creating another post, the ID is going to be 2 and so on. Okay, so this ID is internal identifier. Okay, and then you have a title of the post. So this is looks like this in Spanish, but yeah. And then you have body of the post. Okay, and so on. Okay, so we're going to load this data in our Postman. Okay, so I'm going to copy this URL. I'm going to do Control C. Okay, and I'm going to go to Postman, and I'm going to say request name. I'm creating a new request, and here I'm going to put that new request as get all posts. Okay, if I want to make some description, I can put some description also. Dummy fake server get posts request. Okay, and at the bottom it shows you under which collection do you want to store this new request. Okay, so I'm going to select that dummy collection, and I'm going to say save to dummy collection. Okay, sorry, demo collection. Okay, so I have this get all posts, and there's a get request and all that. Okay, so I'm going to paste that URL that I got from there. Okay, let me paste that URL also here. Okay, so that's the URL, and I'm doing a get request. Okay, you're going to see something like parameters. Okay, we're going to talk about the parameters in a second. You're also going to see headers. You can add certain header information. You can also add authorization. If you are going to log in, you have to provide a token or a username, password, and so on. Or you can also provide that information in the header information. For a GET request, you're going to have parameters. You're not going to have a body. But yeah, these are all the things that you can set here. But in our case, there is no, you don't need any of these because it's a simple dummy thing. I'm going to show you another example of how to, what are the things that you can put there. But let's start off with this basic thing, okay? So I put that URL there, and I'm going to do send request. And that's it. You can see on the bottom, it shows the same data that I got from the web page, okay? Yeah. So this is the information that we are getting from the service. And what is the service here? This is a service, okay? So the service is running at that location, JSON placeholder and all that, okay? And this is the information that I'm getting. So when there's a service that is existing and you got to test manually something, then you're going to go to this tool, which is a Postman tool, and you're going to put the URL there. You're going to put corresponding parameters and all that, and you're going to send the request. You're going to get the data, and then you're going to validate manually. Okay, does this title look correct? Does this body look correct? And all that. Okay, so now we are going to service, getting the data. Okay, and you can see on the top here, it shows something like status 200 OK. Okay, now what does 200 OK mean? I mean, HTTP or a REST protocol has different status codes. Okay, so let's look at HTTP status codes. So I randomly clicked on this Mozilla website. Okay, so there are HTTP status codes, and at a very high level, anything starting with 200 is a success. Okay, so anything that's like 200, that means we got good data back. There is no error in the processing. 200 means it's a success data and everything. Okay, 201 means you're trying to create a resource and it is created successfully. Everything is good. Okay, but anything by default, anything starting with 200 is all successful responses. Okay, and anything starting with 400. Let me go to 400. Okay, client error response. Let's say I make a bad request. Okay, so that by bad request I mean, let's say the data is incorrect when I'm sending it, or maybe the URL is incorrect, or maybe one of the header parameter is not correct, or if I have an authorization, invalid username, password kind of details. So these are all the errors that can happen. 400 means it's a bad request. That means there is something wrong with the data in the request. Okay, 401 unauthorized. That means for this user, he's not supposed to access this particular resource. Let's say if I'm trying to access another user's information, I will get 401 unauthorized. Okay. Yeah. We also have timeout. Okay, that means if it is taking if it is taking too long, or if I'm making too many requests, I can also get this 408 request timeout error. But yeah, anything starting with 400 means it's a client error. That means the person who is sending the request, there is some problem in that request itself. Okay, so that will be 400 status code. And if you look at 500 status code, that means the server has some issue processing your request. Okay, so the server is connecting to a database. Maybe there is something wrong with the server connecting to a database. Okay, so that will be a 500 error. Okay, or maybe the server is trying to open up a file, the file doesn't exist, that will be 500 server error. So from the request, from the client point of view, client is all good. Okay, the data, everything is good, but the server is unable to process the request. In those cases, you should get a 500 error. Okay, so now let me ask you guys a question. When you're testing manually, you go to Postman, you create a request, you get 500 error. What do you do after that? Let's say you get 200 status code, everything is working fine, right? But if you get 400, that means you know that something wrong in the request that you sent. Okay, but if you get 500 status code, I'm going to increase the font here. Okay. Yeah. Hopefully you guys can see this. Yeah. So if you get a 500 server error code, that means you found a bug. I found a bug or found an issue with the server. Okay. Since you are testing the server service and there's a service error, that means it's good. You found something that is actually breaking the server. Okay, so you have to create a ticket to the developer saying that, hey, uh, this is not working as expected. You send this request, and the server is unable to process the request. Okay, that means it's a good thing that you found some issue with the server. And anytime you see any 500 status code, uh, then you have to kind of like raise your voice. You have to pretty much create a ticket, let them fix the issue and all that. Okay. All right, now let's go to Postman. And let's say instead of posts, I just say post. Okay. Here, I don't think I can increase the font. Let me try. Yeah, there's nothing in the Postman that I can increase the font here. Oh, zoom out. Zoom in. Oh, okay, cool. Hopefully, you guys can see this. All right. So I just changed the URL, which is an invalid URL. Okay. So I'm going to do send request. And you can see there's a 400, 404, 404, not found error. Okay. So this status code tells me that that resource that I'm trying to get does not exist. Okay. So by looking at the status code, you can figure out what is, what is the request? Was it processed successfully, or is there error in the request? Is there a server error and all that? Just by looking at the status code. Okay. All right. So this is a GET request. And before I move on to other request types, is there any question on here? I want to start off with something simple, and then we're going to create talk more. But if you guys have any questions, I can probably answer now.
Hi, Raju.
Hi, Sandhya.
Yeah, what will they provide for testing, like API testing, this one? I mean, will they give HTTP address? Like, what will they give for test?
Yes, so they will have a document. The document will
Hmm.
say these are all the methods that we support. Hold on, if I go back here, something like this. They will say that these are all the methods that we support, and there'll be uh, there might be other documentation of what it means. Okay, so here it doesn't say much, but here it's kind of um, the name itself indicates that it's going to give you all the posts. But if it is more complicated, there might be certain other lines, documentation that says this response will give you all the posts. And here you can see there's a post ID equal to 1. Okay, that means this is corresponding to that post ID. You're going to get comments for that post ID that you have specified. So there might be some additional documentation that says for a given ID, what is the expected behavior and all that. So you might have a documentation that indicates all these different things in there. So that is what will be provided to you. And yeah, pretty much based on that, they might also give you some body. What is let's say if it's a post request, you have to provide key value pairs. So the documentation will also tell you what is the key, what can be the value be. Should it be integer, should it be a string, or it's a list of values. It can be blank or non-blank, and all that is specified in the documentation.
Okay, so it's give you have to compare that, like input and output.
Yeah, exactly. So they will tell you what is the request can be. So here I'm pretty much getting the data, but I'm not validating. So if I do posts here, so send. So I got this data, right? Now I don't know whether this is complete data or it can be, or there is more data in the database or so on. So I can go to the database and I can verify that this is the entire contents of that body. Okay, so I'm not talking about the other part, which is going to the database and verifying. Or you can open up a UI and also validate with the UI. UI might show the same as what the service is getting, but you may want to go to database, or maybe you're going to create a post. Okay, so we might do a post request. Um, okay, so I might create a post request. I might create something new, and then I might call a get request, and then I'm going to validate that what I created is the same thing as what I'm getting here. Okay, so that can be another test case also. So these are the things you would be testing it out. So you'll be creating a post, you'll be calling get. You do a put request, you call a get. So when you do a get, you should see the update that you just did. Okay, you do delete the request, and then you try to get. That should give you an error, right? So all this can be the different test cases that you can do.
Okay, thank you, Raj.
You know. So all right. So let's. So there's a get request, and this one, as the name says, post/1. That means instead of giving you all the posts, this only gives you one of the posts. Okay. So let's create another request here, because I'm going to create another one. Okay. Get single post. Okay. So all right. So I got that post/1. Okay. So here again, there is no parameters, but if I do a send request, you can see instead of giving me all the data, this gives me only the data for that single post. Okay, so let's say if you have millions of posts, there is no way you can say give me all the posts and then look at the data, right? So if you are only interested in one of the posts, you would use this kind of a method, and you say give me only the post that I'm interested in, and then you're going to validate that. Okay. So this is very similar to what we saw before, but here we are getting only a single value. Okay. Now let's look at this one. Okay. Comments. For a given post, there can be some comments. Okay. So let's. So here the post means that post is pretty much creating, or in the sense there is some like a blog post or something, and there are some comments for that blog post and all that. Okay. So here we're gonna get the comments. Sorry, I said new collection. Delete this. So new. Okay, get comments for post, and I'm gonna do this. Okay. So here, what we did is for that single post, we are saying give me all the comments. Okay. So we got the data, and you can see that. So here's a post ID, and for that post ID, I have a name, email, and a body. Okay. So same thing as pretty much similar to what it was before, but here this comment is written by this person. This is the name of the person, and this is the email of the person, and this is the actual comment of the person. Okay. So as you can see, this for this post, I got these 3 additional parameters. But here you can see there's a list of values and all that. Okay. Okay. Now this is interesting. Okay. So now this one and this one are very similar. Okay. So so for a single resource, so in this case, the highlighted one, the first one, let me increase the font here. Okay. For the first one, we are saying for the given posts, post ID 1, give me the comments. The second one is also similar. Give me the comments for post ID equal to 1. Okay. So whenever you see this question mark in there, that becomes query parameters. Okay. So that means if I provide this URL /comments, and if I don't provide the post ID equal to 1, that will give me all the comments. Okay. And if I say post ID equal to 1, I mean /comments post ID equal to 1, that will give me the comments only for that post ID equal to 1. Okay. So that is called query parameters, and I'm going to show you that. So let's copy that, and let's say, sorry, I'm going to do new and new request. So get comments for post using query parameters. Okay. So I'm going to paste it here. Okay. And as soon as I put that there, and you can see the postman here has created something called as post ID equal to 1. Okay. So this is a query parameters. Okay. So here, so if I change this to 2, so you can see the postman actually changed the value. Okay, so this is some parsing that does on the URL. Okay, so postman can do URL. Here also I can add some values here. So I can say comment ID, and I can say 10, and it will change the URL there. Okay, I'm just showing you guys here, but if I remove that, it's going to remove from there. Okay, so these are query parameters. And if I go to this website called Amazon's website, let me close this. And you can see here, I'm going to increase the font. Okay, increasing the font increases the text, but doesn't show me the URL. But in the URL, you can see there's a question mark and a bunch of parameters there. Okay, I'm not sure if you can see, but you can open locally in your computer, search for something on Amazon, and you'll see a question mark and child equal to b child equal to 1 and keywords equal to phone. So these are the query parameters. Okay, so if I take this URL, Control E, Control C, and if I go to Postman, new request. Okay, so I'm just creating this new URL and I paste it here. And if I scroll this down, okay. So these are all the query parameters that are listed there. Okay, and you can see that I just pasted the URL, and Postman is able to extract all those values that are in there. It says keywords equal to iPhone and all that. Okay, so if I do a get request and I do a send of that, so I got something 200. Okay, that means I was able to go to Amazon.com and I was able to get the web page, and the web page is all displayed here. Okay, so this can be a test case also. I mean, in the sense, instead of using the browser, you're actually using this Postman to make the request. Now, how does it matter? You might say, hey, I could use a browser. Why should I use a Postman? But if you want to see what is the status code, whether it was successful or not, you can also see something like a header information. So if I go to the response header, this also tells me what is the header that was returned back. So there might be something that is very specific to Amazon. That means there might be, let's say, this identifier, okay, that you see, Amazon identifier, something like this, okay. So this seems like a response identifier, XAMZRID. So this might be something that you may want to go to database and verify something. But yeah, if you want to see these kind of header parameters and so on, you can use Postman to get that particular data and look at the status codes, look at what are the cookies that are installed. So here are different cookies that are also installed as part of the response. Okay, but yeah, Postman offers certain advantages. You can also use browser also, but yeah. So if you want to see some header information, the response status codes, you have to go to use Postman. But if you want to just validate the contents, then you can go to the browser. Okay. But for testing the server, you always got to use the Postman. Okay. All right. So here the query parameters are post ID equal to 2, and I'm going to do a send request, and it's going to give me the comments for that post ID only. Okay. Now let me remove that post ID equal to 2. This, in theory, this should give me all the comments. Okay. And you can see that I got back a lot more comments here. It's a lot of comments here. So since I haven't specified the query parameters, this can give me all the comments that are existing in the system. Okay. Yep. But yeah, if you're interested only in one of the comments, or in comments for one of the posts, you can do post ID equal to 1. Okay. And this gives me the comments only for that post ID. All right, so this on the GET request, right? So you can see validate the status 200 status code and so on. And these are the query parameters. That means we are querying only for some information. We are not getting all the information, okay? So these are called query parameters. And it's only for the GET request. For a post, since you're updating, you're not querying, right? You're not saying, give me this data or that data, okay? So for a post request, there is no concept of query parameters. Same thing for a put, patch, delete request. There is no concept of query parameters. These query parameters come into picture only for a GET request. Okay. As soon as I change this to POST request, this should not be valid. Okay. But it's only for GET request is what the query parameters are going to be. Okay. All right. Let's go to the next request, which is a POST request. Okay. So I'm going to create a new post. Okay. So here I'm going to change this to a post method, okay? Because it's not a get request anymore, it's a post method. So I'm going to change that to post, okay? And as you can see, there are different methods, and most of these are not used many times. The main ones are on the top: get, post, put, patch, delete. These are the very main methods that we use. The rest of these are very rarely used. Okay. The head request can give you the header information. It doesn't give you anything else, just the header information. It's going to give you that. Okay. Some of these I don't even know what they do, but that's fine. Okay. So we're going to do a post request here, and I'm going to paste that URL / posts. Okay. All right. So I have the posts method here. Okay. And I'm doing a post request, but I have to provide some data on how to create that particular blog post. Okay. So here I'm going to the body parameters. Okay. Here I have to provide a body, and I'm going to change this to raw data, and then I'm going to change this to JSON. Okay. So this is how you have to provide a JSON key value pairs in Postman. Okay. So go to raw option, and then the last there's a combo box, or there's a drop down, and then you have to click on JSON, and then you can put some JSON data here. Okay. Let me get this data first. Single post. Okay. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to paste that. And I'm not going to give a ID because this is an internal identifier. I'm going to skip that. Okay. Title is going to be okay. Okay, simple, very simple request here, and I'm doing a post of that, and I'm doing a send request. Okay, so you can see that I got a 201 status code, which means it's created, everything is fine, successful, and this is a user ID title body that I created. And if I see the identifier, which is the internal identifier, it says the new identifier that was created was 101. Okay, so this is a post request, and in the Postman you see a dot here on the top. Dot means you have some changes that are not saved. So if I look into this, then it's going to be saved, and here it will show up as post request. Okay. Okay. Any questions on this, on the post request? So I'm going to give you the body also. This is something that you put in the okay. So that's the body that I put in the body in the JSON data that I'm sending out. Okay. So we created a new post. Okay. I mean, this is a dummy data. This is a dummy server. It's not really creating the data. It's just giving me a dummy response. But if it's an actual server, then you should be able to go to make a get request, get all posts, and you should be able to see the new post that was created. Okay. So here I said ID 101. So if I go to get single post and I try to do 101 and I do send, it didn't find it because it's a dummy server. It's not really creating a post. It's just telling me that okay, I created a post for you. Okay. Yeah, as you can imagine, this is a fake server. People can create thousands or millions of these new posts, and Yeah, it's pretty much giving you success status code, but internally it's not doing anything. Okay. But if it's an actual server, then it will be creating that particular post, and it should create you that resource identifier and all that. But yeah, so here that's how the post request works. Okay, so you're going to go to body, and you're also going to specify what is the type of the data that you're sending, JSON and all that. So if you go to the headers parameter, there are certain headers that you can also put. Okay, one of the most frequently used header information is application or content type. Okay, so you can see content type, and you can put application/JSON. Okay, that means you are saying I'm sending you a JSON data, and that is what the header information tells. So the header information is something that the server is going to look at before even processing your request. It wants to know what is the data type. Is it XML? Is it JSON, or so on? So this is one of the header information you regularly provide. Okay. You can also see there are 9 hidden headers that Postman is automatically creating for you. So if I click on that, yep, okay. So it actually created a content type as application JSON. Okay, I don't have to provide it. Postman was able to figure out from the body that it's a JSON, and it automatically created that. Okay. You can also see user agent. Okay, Postman runtime. That means for a Chrome browser, Chrome is going to put this identifier as Chrome browser, and for Firefox is going to put Firefox. The browser is going to put that, the header information. Okay, Postman is putting its own header information saying that this is coming from Postman. So the server knows who is the client. Okay, and yeah, there are some other header informations that you can also put. But yeah, these are all the header informations. There's also something called as authorization. You can also do authorization header, and then you have to provide the token. Okay, so something like a bearer token, and there will be usually a website that internally you can go there, get the token. But yeah, so you have to get the token and you have to put it here. If there is a username password kind of a mechanism. Okay, but if there is no username password in this case, in our test case, there is no username password, so we don't have to provide this header information. But if there is a login and all that, then you have to get a token and you have to put the token here. You have to say bearer token and you have to put that, and then you have to do a send request. Okay, in this case, there's no authorization, so I'm going to remove that. All right, so we did a post, and I just want to show you a put request or a patch request. Let's create a patch request. Okay. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to create that, and I'm going to change this to patch method type. Okay, because our method is patch here, so I select patch, and URL. Okay. Now I have to provide a body here. So in a patch, we are doing an update. Okay, I don't need to provide all the things that I am updating. I'm just going to provide the things that got modified. Okay, so I just want to update the title of the page. Okay, I'm going to select raw, and I'm going to select JSON data, and I'm not going to give a user ID. I'm not going to give a body, but I just want to provide the title, and that's it. Okay, so I don't need a comma here. So this is a patch or an update request. Okay, and if I do a send request and it says 200 status OK, that means it's able to process that update request, and it also gave me the previous request. whatever the previous data was there. Okay, so this was the body that was there. So it's giving me all the information after updating that particular resource. Okay, so that's a patch request. And if I take a put request, okay, so the put request is also very similar. Update entire blog post. Okay, change this to put. All right, so if I go to body, all right, so here in a put request, I cannot provide a single parameter. I have to provide the entire, all the values. I'm going to show you that. So if I do the same thing as what a patch does, so I'm just going to provide a title and I'm just going to say update. A put request is pretty much an update request. And if I do send, actually in this case it says 200 OK, but in real world, this should be an error because an update has to get all the parameters. Okay. Yeah. So this is an error. This is a fake server. That's why it's validating, it's getting the data. But here I'm supposed to provide all the information in a put request. Okay. In a patch request, you provide only the information that got modified. Okay, so I'm going to remove this identifier here. Okay, so this is how a put request is supposed to look. We are supposed to provide all the information, whether it's modified or not. Okay, but if you want to change only one parameter, you would use a patch request. Okay, there's a difference between patch and put. Patch is very small data that got modified. You send a patch. Put is something that you send the whole thing. And post is to create a request. Okay, and get is to get the information, which is reading the information. Okay, and then finally the delete request. I'll change this to delete. And okay, so delete request pretty much doesn't have a body because there is no other additional information that I'm going to provide. So delete method doesn't require a body information. Okay, so the get method doesn't require a body, and delete doesn't require a body. Okay, post, put, patch, they all require a body. Okay, I'm going to send this, and it says 200 status code okay, and it didn't give me any response value back, which pretty much means that it's able to delete that particular resource. Any questions, guys, so far? So what we looked at is pretty much how to create these different requests, get, put, patch, delete, and all this, and how to use Postman to connect to the service, get all the information, validate what is the status code, validate the header information and all that. Okay, so now let's say you create all these beautiful test cases. Okay, the person sitting next to you may want to have the same test cases, or maybe she created or he created these test cases and you want to have access to those test cases. Okay, so pretty much what you're going to do is this. You're going to do something like export. Okay, so you're going to go to collection and you're going to click on export here. You see the export option. So that export will give you a file that you can give it to another person or maybe you can get it from another person. Okay, so if I do export, so I'm going to click on export option here, and it tells me where do you want me to save this file, and then I can give the directory, file name, and all that. So that is where it's stored. Okay, and then I can take that file, give it to another person, and then he can import, and he will be able to test it out, he or she. Okay, and same thing here. So let's say you got a collection from somebody else. Let's say you join a company and they already have a lot of test cases. You don't want to sit there recreate all these test cases. They're gonna say, hey, here is a Postman collection. Why don't you start using it? Okay. So you would get the file. Once you get a file, you would do the import, and then you would specify the file location where you have the file and everything. So you can go to the folder, choose folder from your computer. So pretty much you're going to download that, and you're going to do an import option, and you're going to import it, and you're going to use it. Okay. Any questions, guys?
No, Raja.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. All right, guys. So sorry for the delay initially, but yeah, I think we are running close to the time. So I'm going to stop here. So this is just a high level of what is the testing, what are the different components that are involved, front end, back end, databases, what are the protocols that are used. Next session, we might look at some of the other tools, something like Jira, Jenkins. We'll look at, if time allows, some other tools I'll look up. You don't have to install anything for Jira or Jenkins because they're not free. And I have access to some of those tools, and I can probably show you guys. But yeah, fine. So next session, we're still going to look at high-level overviews. But after that, we're going to look at some programming, Python basics and all that. And then we're going to start some testing components. Okay. Hello, so in the meanwhile, I want you guys to go to Postman, create some resources. So we tested for one of the fake server, but there's another fake server here. I saw on the search results. Okay, let me just do this. Okay, fake store API. Okay, so you can see there is a few of the other, there's another fake server which can give you the products, product information, product categories, and all that. Okay, so I want you guys to practice. Go to these different services, create some of these collections in your Postman. You don't have to send it to me, but yeah, this is just for your practice. Just create those collections so you know how to at least test, how to create the test cases, manual test cases, and validate what the data you're getting from Postman or the service and all that. Okay. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to post it on WhatsApp. I'll respond from WhatsApp. Okay. Yeah. So this is the thing that update a product. Yeah. So Sandhya, you are asking what kind of documentation do they provide? So this some information, something similar to this, which is like products. You can get all the products by going here. The documentation will not have code information, but at least it will say what does that URL indicate, what does it give you. Get a single product. Okay, so it can give you this. Limit the results. You don't want all the results, but you want only the top 5 results and all that. So you do this. Okay, or you want to sort it by some descending order, by the price, or something that is sorted by that. So you would use this kind of URL. But yeah, this is the kind of documentation that might be provided to you, and it's your job to test it to make sure that it is working as expected. Okay. Looks like this server has a lot of other information, other kind of like get in date range and all that kind of information. So definitely try to test this, add certain things there, add in your Postman, and test maybe like a few post, put, and requests, and try to test it out. Okay. Yeah. If you guys don't have any other questions, I'm going to stop here. And you guys enjoy your weekend, the rest of your weekend. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Yeah, sure. Take care. Bye.